Welcome to yet another. Whoa, it's not yet another episode. Welcome to the season finale of Third and Short, where we talk sports and all sorts of things. And I got my guy DJ Plum with me. I think that's how it goes. Plum, what's happening, fam?
Yo, you know what it is. Back in the building, feeling good, feeling great. How are you, my G?
Oh, man, just hustling, you know what I'm saying? Working, you know what I mean? Glad that America's long nightmare has finally come to an end. But before we get into the conversation, we got to remind the people, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow,
And
share,
follow.
all that good stuff. Tell a friend you're doing it by yourself, you know what I'm saying? And get into the comment sections, you heard me, because we're going to be talking that talk. And of course, we got the merch, y'all. That's right, you got to get the merch. You heard me, gotta get it, okay? You gotta get it. That's right, check out the merch. But of course, like we said, we talk sports and all sorts of things, and the NBA Finals has finally come to an end. We have a new champion, the OKC Thunder. And Plum, my guy, I must say, you've made up for some of those earlier playoff indiscretions because you was right. Seven games, OKC took it. What were your thoughts about the series, how it ended? You know, did you get your money's worth? Were you excited? Did you enjoy it as much as you thought you would, even with it being a 7-game series?
Couple of things. Let's just shout out to me again for being right yet again. I called this all the way from the top, and I got everything that I said I was going to get. I called the last series before we got here. So all of that is fine. I had a couple of mishaps, but I had to make you look good for the season start so I could show you this prowess I got as far as understanding. And here we are at the end of the finals, and I am both happy and yet somewhat unfulfilled. I can kind of actually understand in a way the underwhelmingness of what the finals was in a totality because it wasn't a star-studded one. But for me as a basketball fan, it was everything that I expected, thought, and wanted. I was a fan of good basketball. I was a fan of good teams. I was a fan of people doing the right thing. The only thing about this game that, in particular, Game 7, obviously, is the injury to Halliburton and how it affected the outcome of the game. Because the boy came out red hot. He was already had 9 points. He was well on his way to probably having a very seriously good game. And then the most tragic thing happens, which is he gets injured, obviously, blowing out that Achilles, which was starting, I think the injury started in Game 6. So for me, it kind of deflated from what I was looking forward to, what everything had been built up to, all the smack that I had been talking about this series being what it was going to be. I didn't feel like I got the ending that would have justified everything I said and possibly have enhanced the series to get to a point of where it would have been something that other people had to come back and say, you know what, it wasn't that bad. I actually kind of enjoyed this. I think that piece missing is something that may have changed what could have been otherwise a super phenomenal series, at least from a basketball perspective in my eyes. What say you?
Quick question. How many close games that came down to the wire did this series have?
I mean, most were, with the exception of 2 games out of the 7, most of them were pretty straightforwardly like contested contests. And with that, I mean, within reason, each game was within reason, considering the type of comebacks that Indiana had been pulling, even including the game 1 in this series. This was a series where you knew you could see some sort of fireworks, so you never necessarily turned the TV off per se.
Well, I mean, I think the challenge here was that there weren't that many people that actually turned the TV on. I was actually with my family members, my in-laws. They were dropping off my I guess Selena's mom. And, you know, this was the first game that we watched of the entire series, like from start to finish, if you will, right? Really trying to get into the Game 7. And then unfortunately what happened to Halliburton happened. But to me, I think going in, there was an expectation for me anyways that this game would have probably been what it ended up being. Even with Halliburton, I get it that he was red hot. Anything could happen in Game 7. But the universe is going universe. You know what I'm saying? So I do appreciate that you called it, but it sounds like you were also kind of agreeing with where my position was at the very beginning of this, right? That's why I was kind of joking in terms of the end of America's long-standing nightmare, because this particular series exposed a lot. While I think a lot of the conversation was not only about the game or the series, but just about the NBA. I've heard a lot of conversations, everything from whether or not the floor was decorated properly, whether or not the NBA put a certain level of appropriateness into this, the parity with these two teams, and whether or not. So I think it exposed a lot that, yes, the Halliburton injury was big, but I felt like there was bigger things that kind of clouded this particular. I do get that Game 7 was the most watched in 6 years, but it would take a Game 7, right, in order to maybe even be in competition. I wonder if that says more about either just being Game 7 or just how bad the last 6 years have been, right? Because you hear the stats about how, the last 7 years has been a rotation of champions. That's happened in the past too, so this is like nothing new. But I think what is kind of new, though, is the transition.
Well, what do you mean? What do you mean that rotation has happened like that? As far
so like there's been, I think it was like in the 70s where you had 7 different teams winning a championship year in and year out, right?
70s.
Yeah, I'm saying this is not the first time where you had maybe what was perceived as parity with enough teams winning the championship, right? But back then, a lot of those teams were also bigger market teams or teams that had a little bit more resonance, right? So when you have a team like Indiana, for me, that team I think had a little bit more cachet with the general viewing public because we're at least familiar with Reggie. That's why they had to wheel Reggie out there to kind of gin up some interest in terms of the story of Indiana. But there's some familiarity there with OKC. Yeah, they had that run early on. But as far as them being a team for real, I just don't think they really resonated. So kudos to them. I think they did what they were supposed to do. A young team and learning how to win. Along the way, they had a fantastic season. So hats off to SGA. So I don't want to poo-poo on that. I do love the fact that these young guys seem like they have the potential to kind of keep the party going, right? And we'll talk about the changes in the West that may threaten that. So kudos to them. And at the end of the day, the reason why I kind of felt like the Burton thing was big, but not as much because McCollum was balling his little behind off. I get that he eventually got tired and maybe ran out of gas, but there was a point in time the brother hit like 6, 7, 8 shots. He was carrying the team on his shoulders, right? And so they were playing as much as they can, but there are other guys, even with Hallie going down, that could have stepped up a little bit. I do think Pascal Siakam, being one of the better players on the team who understands that, hey man, it's Game 7. I got to do what I got to do. I don't know that I saw him going all the way there. And I think, again, that speaks to when teams are tried and true and they go through the process enough. And maybe this is what this was, right? So we had to sit through it. But hopefully they can build on that. Because for me, like, sometimes you got to play through it and go through it to then eventually establish yourself in that way. I feel like it was premature for some of these teams. So I get that maybe it plays out that way. But at the end of the day, I just don't know it had that kind of resonance. And so you about to say something?
Well, no, I just kind of disagree with that point in the fact of when I look at OKC has been in the playoffs, 2 years?
Mm-hmm.
1 year, they knock. Second year, they kick the whole door down. Wasn't no fight.
Yeah.
Wasn't an argument like that. I think that's part of also, to your point, why some of this wasn't as flared up as it was, is because there was no struggle.
That's what I'm saying.
There's this team that just kicked in the door, a bunch of new talent with people not realizing that the game of basketball can be played with 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 guys. I hear a lot of people compare this team to the Spurs team, and a lot of people compare this team to the Detroit team, the 04 team that won. The difference is I don't see the 04 team only more so in the fact of just how the defensive prowess was. That's the only thing I see with that. I don't see a set of people where, like, they didn't have an MVP on that team. You see what I'm saying? As far as like scoring champ, MVP, stuff like that. They had players that made shots and stuff like that. Oklahoma City, I think they got a really true young core that now I guess America and the rest of the world will be able to get to know, to be able to understand who they are. But I think
what part you disagree with, though? You say you disagreed?
Well, no, I was saying as far as in the fact of, I guess not necessarily disagree with you per se, but just saying that I think two things can be true at once. I think the Halliburton injury, again, really affected that Game 7. Because I really do think you get a 4 or 5 point game at the end of that game if he's actually able to play all the way through. And I think that not coming all the way through and the injury sucking out some of the life of the game kind of just took away from the moment in general.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that. I wasn't speaking against that. Okay. I'm just saying that I think because this series was underwhelming in terms of the storylines, the interest, like to your point about Halliburton, right? I get that some people were really hurt by it, but a lot of people who were not bought into him necessarily didn't hurt as much, right? Again, it's all about those. I get it. For those who were into it, I get how it took the air out. I saw how it took the air out in real time. But what I'm saying is by the time you get to game 7, a lot of people weren't as into it and not as invested, right? And to your point about OKC, they did just kind of one year, they went out either swept or 5 games last year, right? So, and I also think like when you talk about confidence is a fickle thing. So when people go through the struggle and they eventually get through the struggle and they've built good habits in order to persevere through the struggle, they tend to, I think, on the other side, show up more consistently. So the reason why you've had these past 7 champions, I think, is because you haven't had that consistency. And we're going to talk about trades in a little bit, but with player movement that's happening as consistently as it is, right? You're not having teams maintaining and sustaining for a long period of time, the different cap rules and stuff like that. So yes, maybe OKC could be the future model, but with this trade that we're about to talk about, and my belief that they weren't really tested, because if you remember, the injury part is a big part of this, right? Tatum gets hurt, right? Achilles, right?
Well, I think we need to add. I think we need to add Achilles to the whole portion of everything we just talked about, because it's taking out Dame, it's taking out Hallie, it's taking out Tatum, and that was just all this season. I think there were a couple of more other players that suffered this injury. I mean, we'll get into who else is affected.
I'm saying, well, I mean, obviously KD suffered Achilles, right. So Achilles is a thing. There is that conversation, but what I'm talking about, though, is that in this season, I mean, it happens all the time. I guess just growing up, I don't remember injuries really derailing playoffs like this. Maybe I forget. Maybe I forgot when the Bulls went against the Pacers and the Knicks and all the different teams they faced. I don't recall the injuries derailing it as much as I'm seeing this year. And I'm not trying to cheapen it, but I just feel like it does affect it, though.
To your point, I don't think we've had as many catastrophic injuries like that in play. Like, you didn't see Scottie Pippen or Mark Jackson blow out their Achilles or blow out their knee or tear them. You see what I'm saying? Like, you had some people did it. I mean, granted, Paul Pierce, that time Paul Pierce got hurt and he went out on the wheelchair. I think he actually did tear his MCL and continue to play. So we've had some, but I guess for the most part.
But I mean, I wouldn't even count Paul Pierce in that. I'm talking about growing up in the 90s, in the years when you're talking about there was physical basketball, the Knicks playing the way that they did, right? The Heat or whatever. I'm saying, like, I don't recall that. So this year, when you talk about it, one run where you had, obviously, Steph went out with the hamstring, if I'm not mistaken. I don't even know if the Wolves were really ready for real, for being honest, after how they particularly played, right? You had the old guard that kind of moved to the side. You had the monster trade with Luka, which changed the dynamics for a little bit, right? So I just kind of felt like, next year it'd be great to see what OKC does. I think it's premature to automatically think that just because they won this year, that they're going to win next year, because we've seen in the last 7 years. If I had to put my early money on it, I'd be willing to put money that OKC is not going to win the championship next year.
You're taking the field versus OKC.
Huh?
You're taking the field over OKC. Repeat.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And honestly, with this trade that we're about to talk about right now, with KD going to Houston for what Houston gave up, which was okay, cool. They still kept a majority of their team. For people who may not have heard, right? KD has been traded. I guess it's not official. Maybe they still got some things to work out. But for all intents and purposes, KD was traded from the Suns to Houston for what? Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, I think a draft pick from this year, and then 5 second-round picks,
five second rounds and 1 first round, yeah.
Yeah, so this year's first round, 5 second rounds, right? Which to me, I felt like Orlando probably gave up a Richard Hall, low-key, for Desmond Bane, but that's cool, that's on the East. But my question to you, though, is a lot of people feel like, Houston was number 2, young team being coached by an exceptional coach. Now you got KD, who still can be KD, and what they were missing, scoring, and somebody who can kind of, be a Swiss Army knife with his height and his, ability and whatnot. So people might feel like Houston is a title contender. So what are your thoughts in terms of that? And then also the other changes in the league through trades that can affect the OKC's ability to eventually repeat, or just any other trades that you, Giannis to the San Antonio, for example. So what are your thoughts about the KD verse and all the potential trades happening right now?
I mean, the landscape is vastly changing. Not only with that, let's just start with the injury aspect of everything. Going back to what we were just talking about, Tatum is out next year. So Boston has a whole different look. Whatchamacallit is out. Holly is out next year. So they have a whole different look. Dame is out. And we don't know if, to your point, Giannis is even going to be there. So the East in itself is a crazy monster that's trying to get itself sorted out to a degree. In the West, it's loaded. And now you're going to get to a point where I think we figure out the contenders from the pretenders. For me, I still got OKC ranked number 1 going into the offseason. You're the champs till somebody beats you. That's always been my perspective on how I roll with it on any sport. And that's how I'm going to continue to roll with it. Until somebody beats them or puts them out, right now they're going to be the defending champs. But I will say this Houston trade is highly impressive. And I do honestly believe this makes Houston a legit threat and contender to OKC in the West. I still think there's there's something to be said for Denver. I think given what we saw from them this year, I think there's still an opportunity that they can retool and get back to that championship type form. As long as Jokic can be there and they can keep Murray healthy, they can probably add some more pieces back. Then you're looking at also, like you said, Wemby and the boys in San Antonio. We may find out if this is the year that Ant Edwards takes the growth step and becomes the dude that, we all thought he might actually be. The dog in him might actually grow up and actually get off that porch and show us exactly what we think we may see. Hey, who knows? There's a possibility out there with trade works that Giannis could end up actually in Golden State. Now, could you imagine what that does for Steph? And we ain't even talked about.
I don't see that. There's no way I see that.
It's literally possible, not probable. Now, this in certain scenarios that I've seen, this would require them probably giving up somebody like Draymond.
Everything, including Steph.
Well, this would be a this would be a multi-team trade. You're not trading Steph.
Yeah.
You're not trading Steph.
That's what I'm saying.
But you can find a way to swing some other pieces. And then, of course, there's the Lakers and Dallas. I think when Dallas is healthy, the question on them right now is Kyrie Irving's injury and stuff like that. Dallas is going to look really good once they get everybody back and if they can stay healthy. And then again, if LA can find or go get a big man, they may be a problem. So to your point about the repeating part for OKC, definitely going to be, I would say next year is the year if you're saying that you had to prove it through a through and through tried and true test. I think if you get out the West next year and you win the championship, that's going to say a lot. I mean, it said a lot to me this year, but I think if you can do it in this new West coming up next year, it's going to say a whole lot more. So specifically the KD part, again, I think this puts them in the conversation. I don't know if this is putting them the step over, because I still need to see the growth as we talk about from a lot of these teams taking that next step to be able to say, okay, so the scorer is the one thing, but who's going to be the leader on that team? They still got to re-sign Fred VanVleet and get that taken care of to ensure they have a championship caliber point guard. But who's going to, KD's going to score points, but he's obviously not going to be the vocal leader. He's not going to be the guy that's demonstrative on the court and all of that. So who's going to be that person that when they need that push can give them that and give them that edge? And I still wonder, I need to see it together a little bit more, but on paper, it's a wonderful addition. I probably will put them third in the West overall right now based on that trade. Wow.
Okay. I don't know, right? So I think part of my premise, if we're starting with OKC, is that I just still don't think that it's like the Boston situation. I need to see them do it next year, right? I said the same thing about Boston where I felt like, okay, yes, they did it last year. I get it. But going against Dallas, I wasn't really bought into like the challenges they had to go through to win it. So I need to see it the second year. I think I feel the same way about OKC. Kudos to them. And it's nothing wrong with being a one-time champion. Like I said, in the last 6 years prior to this, we've had people who were champions and who didn't repeat, including Denver. But I think Denver, when you mentioned Denver went 7 games, right? This is the same Denver that lost their coach and their general manager a few games before the postseason, and they still took what would eventually be the champs 7 games. And people talked about, obviously running out a little bit of gas and stuff like that. I think had they had a better season, maybe they're in a better seeding position, and maybe they tweak a little bit. So I don't think they're off at all. I think as long as they come back with
matters
a coach
not, though.
And a full
matters not. Seeding position matter not. They were still playing the number 1 team in the league.
Right. What I'm saying is that they still won 7 games, right? That's a significant point. My point is that as far as Denver's concerned, that they don't have to do much in order to still compete, right? And maybe next year, depending on how the rest of the teams play, because I don't think OKC is going to go 16-14 again. I'm sorry, I don't. Right?
Yeah, that's again, very few teams have won as many games as they won this year. So,
bro, I feel you, my guy, but I'm just trying to get through my commentary, right? You just gave your whole spiel about the trade, and I can't even finish a couple of sentences. You know what I'm saying? So my point is, right? OKC, I don't think is going to win 68 games next year. I'd bet money on that, right? This year, a lot of teams from 2 through 9 were packed up, right? And then on top of that, you had the midseason colossal trade of Luka to the Lakers. So both teams were obviously affected with a midseason trade. So I kind of low-key felt like, okay, whatever they end up doing, right, they still were kind of works in progress. Cool, you have Phoenix, who was kind of nipping and tucking, but now you bring KD over to Houston. Houston was the number 2 seed, if I'm not mistaken. Were they lacking necessarily? Scoring and some experience, right? So you bring KD, who does both efficiently, could fit into almost any fucking system. And outside of the coach for the Clippers, whose name escapes me right now, Ime Udoka has proven to be an exceptional fucking coach, so he just got an extension. I would take him over OKC's coach any day of the week, twice on Sundays, right? So when I look at the change that they've made right now going into the season, I have confidence that they're going to be able to compete at a very high level because if I'm not mistaken, one of their calling cards was defense. Right? That's part of the reason why. So when you talk about OKC being a great defensive team, maybe not having the firepower, guess what you just did? You just brought some motherfucking firepower of the highest order. And KD's, I think, coachable and all that kind of good stuff. And his leadership does not have to be out front. He's the kind of guy that the players are going to respect because he's KD, a champion, right? And so he doesn't necessarily have to lead demonstratively in terms of for other people to see. So that's one. You got the Lakers on the other side. To your point, many people felt like, hey, they're only one big man away. So again, I feel like, hey, kudos to OKC, but the path next year is going to be murderous. And you hope that these teams now have a full training camp, have a full year to be able to prepare for the season. And to your point about Anthony Edwards, I think for them to even be competitive for real, they got to find somebody else that can kind of be that number 2. Because we saw even with SGA, there were moments that his number 2 came up and was able to play big. And I feel like for Anthony Edwards, while Julius Randle did really well, I think he kind of knew he didn't have enough to a certain extent, right? Or at least felt that way. So while they made the trades that they felt like was good for them, at the end of the day, I think he understood he didn't have enough. And that's kind of why they whimpered out. So unless and until they make a trade, I don't really look at them. And of course, everybody wants to see Golden State continue to compete. And they weren't that far because at the end of the day, they got Jimmy. So, that was another team I totally forgot that did a monster trade midseason. So now you got Jimmy. Had Jimmy had a full year, had they been able to kind of integrate him more into the system. And unfortunately, Steph got hurt. So again, had they been able to stay healthy, maybe had they had a year in with each other, maybe they go against SGA. And again, I'm going to always lean on that championship medal and that experience. So while I do think kudos to them, it's good to go ahead and get yours in. But I just feel like they still didn't go through it to get to it. You dig what I'm saying? And so next year, if they can do it, cool, hats off. But I want to see it. I want to see it. And the other thing I'll say lastly, because I think when you climb that mountain, there's a certain swagger you walk around with. I got to tell you, Plum, I don't know that I've seen that like next year swagger. You know, the kind of swagger that would kind of put you in the running for real. I mean, Boston was relatively close because they maybe could have went back to back. But think about Giannis and them. Did they give you that feel like, oh, they're the team to beat this year, right? Did they give you that feel? Because I didn't get that feel from them, right? Even when Golden State won, right? Did they give you the feel like, oh, they're the team to beat? Yeah, you kind of hoped it, but you didn't see it, though, throughout the season enough to really believe it. So I hope OKC can start to build some muster. But, bro, I don't really see it right now. You know what I'm saying? And I put my money on a lot of those other teams, to be honest with you.
I hear you. And you said a lot of that coming into these series. You've thought a lot of those things on the way here. Yeah. I'm just here to tell you everything I've said has been fact. And everything that I've said has come to pass. OKC just learn how to be. I don't give a damn what the path is. Just like you said, the NBA is going to NBA. I'm sorry that so-and-so decided to make a trade at the middle of the season. Sorry to disrupt your team. All those are random excuses that every year happens to somebody. It's going to always be something to somebody else. At the end of the day, I will say this team was projected to be the best team. The guy on this team was projected to be the MVP. Not only did they get the best record, have the best season, and well, not overall the best season, obviously they didn't go undefeated like the other teams, but have one of the best seasons in history. The guy collected every single piece of hardware as a player and a G you supposed to get, from the Larry O'Brien to the Bill Russell and everything in between. For me, this team just got even better because now they know they can do it. One of the things, to your point, that actually showed me that I think they are championship ready for next year is the fact of how they didn't even, when I looked at Shea when he was talking about winning and actually having won the championship, and he was so businesslike. He was, yeah, well, you know, I did this for my fans and my family. We stick to the business. I would be losing my mind. Remember KG and everybody else? Anything can happen or possible. All of that emotion, all of that stuff. We didn't see none of that from them. We saw them be like, yeah, This was the business that we were supposed to do. Now we're here. And I fully believe that the only thing that I think stops them next year is injury.
You know, it's funny, bro. What you just said, I think, and we can move on to the next topic, but I think you kind of are proving my point. What you read from SGA as, oh, business like, we're going to act like we've been here before, right? What you could read as that, others can read as maybe just doesn't mean as much as it used to. Right.
I mean,
so
how do you quantify though? I'm seriously though. How do you quantify
a different
championship
approach to the same thing that you're talking about? The same way one player can be passionate, another person can be. People have perceptions, so you can choose to look at it, and you just said it. So I'm saying, for me, there's a way that others can look at it, because the argument, and I get it, right? For me, I'm a big thinking person sometimes, because there's other conversations being had, right? If we want to just keep it about the basketball, it's over now, right? But what people are talking about are a lot of myriad of things that played out in the series, but also with some of these trades that's happening, right? Teams are positioning themselves. So number one, for example, you have the injury. So now, just based off of what happened this season with the Boston Celtics, and you know he's not going to be back next year, so they're out of the running for real. Then you got the injury with Halliburton. So now there's two teams that, maybe could have built some level of cachet with the audience that necessarily is not going to be there. So now it kind of leaves you with a couple of other teams. That's one perspective of what's happening in the NBA right now that people are saying is because of pace and space. So let's move that to the side in terms of how they're playing these players, the 3 points, and how the bodies are moving away, the points being scored per game. So that's one issue that the NBA is going to have to face, right? That's one. Number two, then you have like the whole star conversation. It is a storyline narrative business. They haven't been able to do that very well. Part of it is because people are moving all around all the time. They're not having any staying power necessarily, right? Then you talk about the international game. International fans typically follow players more. This is more of a player-driven league. So then when you have players constantly moving, it's hard to get resonance. KD's about to move on his 6th or 7th team, it feels like, right? Throughout an illustrious fucking career. A guy like him should not be moving around like that. But him and LeBron become the poster childs of players who feel like they got to constantly move. That's why there's still a resonance for the Kobe's who stayed with the Lakers. There's a resonance for the Stephs who stayed with one team, right? And so we're losing some of that ability as well, right? And then also the question becomes, these players are getting mad money. They're getting mad. So you talk about Ant-Man. People feel like, damn, Ant-Man, don't you care for real? That was what people were questioning, how he talked about ending. You were mad too of how he responded. Like he almost didn't even care for real. So now you got the question of whether or not the players even give a fuck. So yes, you can read him as being businesslike, but I promise you, bro, I get it. People can pretend they've been there and act like they've been there before, but I just think you can read it differently. I think you can read it that it is just business, right? Because the corporatization of the NBA, right, in terms of, matter of fact, I'll give kudos to Joy Taylor. I usually don't fuck with Joy Taylor, but she has some good shit to say. I saw her on the Joe Budden podcast, and one of the things that she talked about was how she questions if the soul of the game, the things that we love, the storylines, the rivalry, how we don't even have rivalry for real. What team are rivalries now? For real. Like for real. Legit rivalries right now that we've seen play in the last couple of years that's built up that animosity that you look forward to, like Houston did
none
when
of the
they
teams
played.
That have rivalries are none of the teams that have any actual rivalries are really.
Bro, if you literally go down the list of the things that some of us old school heads may say made the NBA during the Jordan, the 90s, and even up to LeBron's era, were things like dynasties, right? Were things like big market supremacy to a certain extent. No? Right? These are the things, storylines or consistent trips to the playoffs.
Nothing you have said, I disagree with.
Yeah, you say you're talking facts. We all can talk facts, bro. It just depends on what facts we choose to focus on.
Nothing you said has anything to do with what we were talking about with regards to next season and OKC being able to be champions again.
It has everything to do with it, because guess what? Even though OKC won the championship, if the Lakers bust a move and start off a certain type of way, who do you think that people are going to be looking at as the favorites?
OKC.
Okay, bet. We'll see the pundits. You clearly don't pay attention. Right?
No, clearly I pay attention because if you look at Vegas numbers have already come out and they are the number one team already odds on to win next year.
It's one day from the season, bro. I'm not talking about Vegas.
Vegas puts the numbers out there.
I'm talking about the media, bro. I'm talking about what people pay attention to. What you seem to forget is all these things play a role.
People don't pay attention to the money they spend.
No, so you don't think like when people were getting on Stephen A about playing the little Tetris thing or whatever the fuck he was playing at the game, you ain't think people had something to say about that? Right? Come on, bro. Like, there's a larger conversation being had about the NBA product, whether it's partners, almost on every level, whether the partners are doing enough to support the game. They're part of the reason, right? This has never happened.
I'm not disagreeing with any of that, but that has nothing to do with actually playing on the court, is what I'm saying. But when it comes to the exit, now, if you're talking about, again, what we've already come to agree with, which is the style, the look, the draw, all of that of the NBA, yes, 1,000% agree.
But that's what I've been saying the entire time. I don't care about the play on the
You
court.
were wrong.
Most people don't care about the necessarily the play of the court. That's what I'm saying.
I get, they may not have to.
Yeah.
They don't have to care. Well, for them, put it this way. You not caring about it still doesn't affect how the ball goes through the hoop or how a person puts the ball through the hoop. That's my point. You caring about that is irrelevant to that part of the game. Now, as far as is it relevant to the eyes watching it and the people being drawn to it? Yes. And I've already admitted that. But again, that ain't what we're talking about here, and at least not from my perspective. That is what
we're talking about. We're talking
maybe
about
you and I are talking about two totally different things.
We're talking about trades being made, right? We're talking about what's changing in the league as we talk, right? Why do you think these teams are making these trades?
Because they want to be able to be in the position OKC just put themselves in.
Right, but no, that's not true because OKC did it differently.
I'm sorry, so none of them
they
want to be
champions. Yes, they want to be champions, yes, but there are people who are doing it differently. So this idea that OKC sets the tone, and I'm telling you that Houston is going in an all-in kind of move because KD only got about maybe 2-3 years left. So I'm saying when we talk about the KD story, why I look at the OKC Thunder as not being that. If I'm Houston, I'm not threatened by them. I'm not threatened by any of the niggas who won. I get me maybe being threatened by Boston if I was on the East, but Boston is gone. There's nobody really to be afraid of, including the fucking champs, right? So for me, when I think about the storylines, because guess what? When we talk about marching up to the playoffs next year, people are going to care about the storylines because that's how you seed and you sow in investment in the game. So yes, they're going to be talking about the Lakers, right? They're going to be talking about KD, right? And depending on how they start off the season. So I'm just saying if it was up to me, I would put my money on KD and the Houston first or one of the other 2 or 3 teams that I really believe have a shot over OKC, in part because I don't buy into whatever they were trying to sell me from this season, and because I also look at storylines. And I think the NBA also understands storylines. They're going to look at this season, and I'm not saying they can do anything about it, but I do think that if you're asking them in their heart of hearts what they want to see, it is about selling the sport, bro. And I just think that the teams are making moves in such a way that is going to be them and not OKC necessarily in the final lap. Well, so we'll see how that goes. I don't care what Vegas says. You know what I'm saying?
We'll see.
But speaking,
right now, my track record speaks well, though.
Yeah, I mean, okay, you got a series or 2. Congratulations. You also got a series or 2 wrong.
I got the championship.
You also got a series or 2 wrong. You don't see me over here dancing about it. Just like you said,
like
OKC, why don't you act like you've been there before? I wasn't wrong either. Just like you focused on basketball,
you had New York. Did you not have New York? Did you not have New York in last series?
Just like you focused on basketball on the court, I focused on everything else. And I got you.
Did you pick New York in the series?
You were right on the court in regards to the basketball, and I was right in regards to this series being a yawner and people not really giving a fuck.
That's an opinion. Calling that's still an opinion. The fact is,
people did.
No.
We
picked series.
That's a fact. These are the lowest numbers. That one game does not
matter. That's still more an opinion. You and I can differ on the fact of whether or not we like the series. What we can't differ on is what we called the series.
The series was piss poorly viewed.
Look,
it was one of the worst viewed, the least interest gained. Okay, so you can try to reach
all of that. Did you pick the right teams?
Who cares? No. That's my point. I didn't care the entire time.
Well, clearly,
you care. I don't care.
I don't. It's not about me caring. It's about me being right.
People focus on the shit they care about. I've been talking about the shit that I care about. You've been talking about the shit that you care about. I gave you kudos for being right about the shit that you care about. And if you don't want to give me kudos for the shit that being right about the shit I care about, cool. But they did not.
I have admitted to you multiple times that I've agreed with you, so I don't understand that. I don't even understand what you're saying.
It was whack juice. I was hoping it was over. The only reason we're doing this finale episode was because the motherfuckers couldn't close the shit out in 6. You know,
what you said it was going to go, though.
Over in 3.
It was supposed to go 3. It was supposed to go 3. It was supposed to go 3.
Exactly. Listen, I could be wrong. I'm still here. But damn, you know what I'm saying? This shit was whack. It was whack. Booty. Booty.
I feel you.
Booty. You know who's not whack, though? Well, I mean, I guess it depends on what side of the coin you're looking at, because apparently the Lakers sold for an valuation of $10 billion. Right? She didn't get the full 10. I hear people saying that. It was evaluated at 10. I think the brother got like 50-some%. Mark Walters, the majority owner, I believe, of the Dodgers, who I guess, was already a minority owner of the Lakers, and they finally decided, hey man, we want a little bit more than a minority. So he put that, bread up or whatever. Jeannie gets to stay on board as a governor for a few years. I guess they still have a percentage or whatever. But I think the thing that stuck out to me was $10 billion, the most, right, for any sports franchise, right? I think the Boston Celtics sold, I want to say for $6 billion just a couple of minutes ago, right? And so it goes
$6 billion for them
to 10. What are your thoughts about the Lakers, man? I mean, selling, right? The Buss family no longer the majority owner. It's been a family business. What are your thoughts, man? What does this mean for Luka and them? LeBron and them.
I don't really care, quite honestly. I'm not a Laker Nation person like that. Like, for me, the franchise is cool, the story, all of that. If anything, the sports business side, which you do like about this, means a lot in the fact of the landscape. I wish I had me money to get into an NBA team. You and I were talking before about potentially why Magic Johnson wasn't in on this, or possibly wanting to be in on this, as far as what you could gain from it. But looking at the valuations of these teams and things like that, I tip my cap to be able to just get into that room. I don't know what this changes for them on the court. I don't know. I know as an owner, Mark has been willing to spend money. Obviously, the Dodgers, one of the best payrolls in baseball, and clearly getting baseball done with Shohei and the guys winning championships and stuff like that. So on one hand, I'm like, okay, it's set up for them to be able to move in the right direction. But to be quite honest, with the different taxation, with the aprons, I'm just not sure what the next step is going to be with regards to spending now that it's his money. And then also with Jeannie Buss being the governor still over the franchise, like, so does that mean still her hand in guiding this will be going forward? Are we still listening to LeBron at any point in these movements anymore? Or is it Luka's decisions now that are going to dictate the team that go forward? So it's a lot for me not to say, I won't say I don't fully care. It's so much there that I don't know that how relevant it's going to make them when it comes to what they're going to do on the actual court. But I mean, kudos to them and good news. I'll land with that.
Well, I think that's one thing that provides balance on the show, because this is a rhetorical question, but if people were only paying attention to sports, there'd be less podcasts. There would be less people talking about the sports. There'd be less Cowboy stories, even though the Cowboys haven't won shit in Lord knows how long, right? But there's a reason why these sports shows talk about these teams, because as much as you may not care, Plum, the data, the fact of the matter is that the audience typically cares about these things. That's why these stories lead. That's why Magic is able to command the space that he does, right? We talked about that a little bit as far as jokingly off camera. But the point is, the reason why I care is because if I'm going to spend time trying to reach out to people, then I gotta care about these stories that go beyond just the court. Because I also understand fundamentally, when you talk about reaching out to the masses, it's like a soap opera. People like the other stuff to the game. That's what they attract them to a certain extent. There's things that can happen on the court that often mirror like a soap opera, a drama, right? Which is why we love last second shots, why we love heroic, right? People are able to spin stories of heroes and villains within snapshots. But when we talk about things like ownership, maybe that's harder for the masses to understand. But what people hear when they hear a guy with big money is that, okay, there's not going to be anything in the way that's going to stop him from us winning a championship. Even though the Buss family owned it, people believe they were kind of hamstrung a little bit. They weren't necessarily trying to overspend. So the way that they kind of moved as a small family operation in consideration of the NBA to a certain extent. So how things like this then affect the things on the court depends on whether or not the owner, for example, is willing to go into the luxury tax or the second apron or whatever, right? I have to imagine that the way that the Lakers have moved for the most part have been a little bit more prudish in terms of spending. So maybe they have not gone into that. So maybe you have a new owner who says, I got a couple dollars. LeBron's only going to be here for a couple more years. Let's go full tilt a little bit. We weren't that far off last year. So if I got to get a window of 2 to 3 years, so now I'm going to move a little bit differently, especially if we ain't scared of OKC. So this might be a window for us and every other team that feels like they could win. Because sometimes, right, when people are scared of the bully, guess what they don't do? They know they're going to win. And there were times during the Bulls run, there was only a couple of teams who really felt like they got a chance. Some of those people were losing like Mike Tyson opponents. Not because Mike was really knocking them out. They were showing up in the ring scared off rip and know they didn't have a chance. So as soon as the Bulls would go up by 20, the motherfuckers would fold, right? That's why you didn't see certain comebacks back in the day. If a team was up 20 points, nigga, it was a wrap here. You weren't coming back like that.
Well, you also weren't shooting threes like that either. So
I hear you, but I also
that changes the game tremendously.
I hear you, but my posit is still that you had teams that because they knew how to win, you had teams who also knew how to close people out. That was part of the championship medal of the teams who went through the cycle and became champions in such a way that you had to be scared of them because they showed you what time it was. Their weaknesses was not a many. Right. So my point is that I just think that, I don't know, I train of thought. Oh, the Lakers. So my point is that for me, I do think what happens in the ownership does trickle down to what's going to happen on the court. I do think that this is going to make the Lakers way more dangerous because, again, the guy who's willing to spend and he's not operating in the frugal kind of way that the previous owners were, yeah, he might be willing to go down into that second or third apron. And especially if you just bought the team for the valuation of $10 billion, I'm sure you didn't buy it thinking that's the highest valuation. You're thinking, damn, can I get some more? Because you wanted to your value to go up, right? So now you got LeBron at some point in time. I think he maybe got at least 2. God forbid he has any injuries or whatever, maybe even 3. But if you get him for like that 2 or 3 and a team that can possibly win and for him to still be an approximation of himself, that LeBron tour that he's going to grow on when he is finally done, oh my God, the amount of money that's about to be generated. So I could see it being a smart move for him. And I guess when you're that rich, it don't matter. So it's like, whatever, man, this is a new little toy for me. But I will say this though, because and we said this, and so let's talk about it now. I was curious of why Magic was not included in this conversation because he's like been Mr. Laker. That's my sister. You know what I'm saying? Everybody knows and associates him with the Lakers. And then you got the owner who he is a co-owner with, right, for the Dodgers. And I'm like, okay, well, give me like a piece of a percent? Like, why wouldn't that just off of PR and GP would Magic not be included in this? I was kind of curious about that. We talked about it a little bit. What were your thoughts on that?
I mean, for me, again, it rolls down to 2 things. Either Magic may have wanted more of a voice, I think, than they may be willing to give up. And not to say Magic don't got bread, because again, you said a minority piece. I think maybe Magic probably wanted more than a smaller piece. And I think ultimately it may just have come down to, yeah, we don't want to give you that much percentage of the pie.
I don't know, man. I mean, listen.
I think it's I like you. You're great. You've been a great ambassador, but nah, nigga, you can't own the team, though.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't think it's a matter of him owning the team outright. I don't think he was trying to. I get if he was trying to get into like the Jordan situation, but I mean, come on, it's the Lakers. You can't get come on, man. Like at this point, it's a vanity situation. Like you need it, but like you've been associated with the Lakers this entire time.
Well, no. But to your point, how long?
I don't need 5%, 10%.
Let me ask you
give me a percent.
No, I'm not. I'm with you.
Just like I say, I'm an owner.
Look at this. Look at this. How long has Magic been retired and been an ambassador for the Lakers?
Yeah.
You don't think he's asked about this before?
I'm saying this is the first time he has a relationship with the guy. You can't give a brother a piece.
That's what I'm saying. So that's what I'm saying. Based on what we're saying, don't you believe that he's had to have asked for this before in some capacity? Like I can't imagine he's invested in all this other stuff and not tried to get the investment in. And maybe wasn't he? Well, let me back up. Wasn't he partially a part owner of the Lakers at one point and maybe had to give that up in order to pursue some other things?
I don't know.
Maybe that's what it is. Maybe there's something contractually with something else that he's got going that may not allow that. I don't know.
I don't know, man. I mean, I think, I don't know if anybody asked the question or no. We see a lot of times where people are like, small percentage owners. It's kind of done for PR for the most part. And I get it. Maybe his pride or maybe he wanted more than that. But come on, man. Like, you mean to tell me Magic couldn't get a piece? You know what I'm saying? I mean, he has enough rings for the Lakers. You dig what I'm saying? You would think he could have some papership, some ownership with the Lakers, right? Papership. But speaking of rings, right? Because this was a conversation, right? Speaking of the Lakers, right? With LeBron and ring culture. LeBron had a lot to say. I think his commentary in short was, we're obsessed with counting rings and how maybe it's unfair, right? Because there are other elements in terms of judging one player's greatness. I remember watching First Take and a bunch of guys who didn't have rings, like Tracy McGrady and Gil Arenas had a lot to say about the conversation, and I wonder which side of the conversation they fell on, right? But what are your thoughts in regards to this whole ring culture conversation, and I guess the measurement for greatness, and maybe is it unfair? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, different players go through different things and different, eras and stuff like that. Like, is it really fair? Like, maybe LeBron has a point. What are your thoughts?
LeBron ain't got no damn point, and I'm so sick of this damn crying. See, here's my problem. It would be different if LeBron James came across like Tim Duncan. Didn't say much, kept to himself, boom, just keep it moving. This is the same LeBron James that was in Miami, my Miami Heat. Not 5, not 6, not 7, not 8. Literal words uttered out of your mouth, not having had even one to your name yet. And yet we sit here now and we want to act like you play the game for everything other than to win. When did that change? When did we get to a point that we became so soft in society that we forgot what the hell we play sports for? Sports is competition. You compete against another to win. There is a winner and a loser. Period. People talk about that's not fair. Life ain't fair. Stephen A. always says fair is a place where they judge pigs. And he's exactly right, especially in this case. No, it ain't fair. The difference is see, we used to appreciate greatness and understand that there was still a different room, if you will, in this whole legacy of greatness conversation. You play the game to become a champion. So people are going to say, well, you don't think Barkley was that good? He didn't win a championship. No, he did not. But you know what he did do? He did compete for one. If you look at most of the greatest players, almost in any sport, they have, even if they didn't win it, they at least competed for one. Many people consider Dan Marino probably one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL to never have won a Super Bowl. But he played in one. Did he ever get back? No. Did that ever stop us from recognizing his greatness? No. But am I going to also put him in the same breath as I'm going to put Joe Montana and Tom Brady? No. There is a reason you play the game and win. And Tom Brady pisses me off by turning around and then telling LeBron James he's the GOAT, although that's his opinion and his right to feel about any player he wants to feel. How you gonna sit there and say that knowing that you got the most all-time rings and that's why you're considered the GOAT in your sport? Never the best athlete or the best player, but the GOAT. And yet you're gonna sit and turn the guy that can't even catch Kobe yet for the number of rings with regards to being in GOAT status? Come on. Miss me with all of this hanky-panky, oh, woe is me, I'm soft. I keep hearing everybody talk about stuff. If you didn't want to win a championship and you didn't want all that, what the hell you play the game for? Man, take this mic away from me, man.
I'm gonna remember something to tell you after we're done today, right? Because I was like, hey, someone save something for tomorrow. you thought I was bullshit. Because here's the thing, right? And listen, I have no issues with LeBron. I think LeBron's amazing and he's great. I do think he does have a point though, right? Which kind of sucks because I don't like really. Sometimes I want to be on LeBron's side. But like for example, yes, when he went down to Miami, he was chasing rings. So as a young man, maybe he succumbed to these, the ring culture conversation. He understood that in order to be validated a certain type of way, that he had to go out there and win some rings, and so he did that. Right. And so later on in his career, having 4 rings and obviously campaigning for being seen as the GOAT, and believe it or not, there's a good sizable amount of people who would say that LeBron James is a GOAT beyond Tom Brady, including players who are younger who played in the NBA. It's not far-fetched to understand that LeBron is seriously neck and neck to a certain extent, maybe more than anyone would really imagine, and anybody who lived up to the Jordan era would really appreciate it, for being honest. But I get it, right? And in fact, if LeBron were to go out there and win another ring, I think the conversation would get a little different, which which is the irony of him saying what he's saying, right, in regard to the ring culture. I think a lot of times what turns me off about LeBron is that he seems to say things that benefits how he's perceived and not recognizing that it also affects how he's perceived, right? Like the fact trying so hard to be compared with and be seen as great as Michael Jordan shows, and that's ugly. And I think it turns a lot of people off from really considering you that way, because Michael Jordan didn't have to do that in order for people to appreciate him for being the greatest. I think the other thing, though, is not even so much about rings with LeBron. I think that's where the conversation gets twisted, because I think for him, he wants to make that conversation. But when you see greatness, even if LeBron would have only won 4 rings, if I would have seen him die on the floor, like in the sense of having that killer instinct, and you knew that he wasn't the reason that they lost, but he went to as many as he did, I think there'd be a really credible argument for him. Because there is something to be said for all of the finals that he went into. But for people like me who study the game and understand how disruptive his move was to the entire half of the NBA, you understand how shrewd it also was, right? You also understand the power, the dynamics that he was able to wield to a certain extent in ways that Michael Jordan did not, while still figuring out a way to elevate his team to the ultimate goal. Right? Jordan is the best to me, not simply because of the rings. And I think that's where the conversation gets twisted, because Robert Horry has 7. Right? There's other great players that we acknowledge have 6 or who have more than Jordan, right? Like the Bill Russells of the world. But that's not the only reason that we separate him. We saw a person who seemed to dominate the sport in a way, especially in a body, because it was usually centers who did that, in a way that was never done before, and doing it consistently and capturing the imagination. This goes back to my previous point. What made Michael Jordan great wasn't just that he won on the court. He was magnetic. He was attractive off the court. When you have people who never watched basketball before look at him and deify him, that was him as a person, and yes, as a player, but also as an aura that elevated to me. So that's what separates to me. So to your point, yes, there's different rooms, and it's okay for people to separate. That's why when I was watching Tracy McGrady, they made it seem like a slight to say that there's other levels. It was a slight against them, and I understand what they were saying. Right? Because they don't want to accept that their greatness is limited compared to other people. But the fact of the matter is, right? The fact of the matter is there are levels, like Stephen A. always says. And I was telling my wife, like, they would have been better off acknowledging that as opposed to like fighting it. Because when you fight it, and I felt bad for Stephen A. because he really couldn't go back at them because he fucks with them and they're on his show. Right. But if he had the ability to tell Tracy McGrady that when he was up 3-1 and the expectation for him to win that series and it didn't happen, yes, sir, when you get paid the more money, we're going to put it on you while you did not win. Yes, you can cry me a river about not having enough, but did you at least touch it long enough? Pause, right? Were you at least like, damn, like for example, Patrick Ewing. Patrick Ewing didn't win, but to your point, he at least made it to the big game, right? But before he made it to the big game, he made it to the conference finals a lot. Right? So he showed that he could elevate his team consistently to a level. Same thing with Charles Barkley. I'm sorry,
MVP, all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And the thing that really got me too, bro, and I'll pass it back to you, the thing that really got me about those brothers in particular, like Gilbert Arenas, like, bro, you fucked up your own career. You was a knucklehead. You did things that did not allow a franchise to want to invest in you. So you can't sit there and be like, oh my God, well, they didn't invest in me. Shut the fuck up. Like, off the court and in the locker room, you was a reason why that team didn't win when they had to suspend your dumb ass because you thought it was cool to play with guns. Like, I mean, ever since, he's a cornball to me, and no disrespect like that, because I don't know the nigga, but what I've seen of him screams cornball. So when I hear him talk a certain type of way, it's like you're not aware. So between you, the only person I gave grace to was Jay Williams, because he had a catastrophic injury early enough in his career, and I could at least give him grace, being a high draft pick and having potential, that he could feel like he was robbed, of having a career at all. I give
at least he got a championship in college.
Yeah, exactly. I give him some grace. But the other niggas that was sitting there talking, like, shut the fuck up. Like, y'all are great. I mean, first of all, y'all are one of few of hundreds of that tier players. So you're already one of the greatest athletes. You're already one of the greatest basketball players. But amongst your contemporaries, there's levels, man. And it's okay with admitting that you're not on those people's level. A great individual scorer, great. But I don't really recall T-Mac being a two-way defender like Kobe was. I don't recall that.
He had moments, and that's all I can say is
I said moments. Like Kobe.
No.
These niggas don't work as hard as the Kobes or the Jordans. They don't work as hard, bro. That's LeBrons. The niggas who ball at that level, nigga, they work extremely
hard. I'm not saying these guys don't work hard. I'm talking about there's levels,
which
right?
is why.
And some people just don't contribute the same level of time, same level of focus, right? The same level of, of desire in their career. They were great because they could wake up and shoot the ball and be great up to that level, but it's all right, fellas. Nobody's taking away from your greatness. You know what I'm saying?
No, but you were 1,000%. And that's exactly what to my point. That's 1,000% agree. I'm 1,000% in agreement with you on that. And that's the thing about the rooms is like, so when did we get to a point that we couldn't understand that there were levels to it? Like, to your point, you brought up the perfect name, Robert Horry. Do we know him? Yes, we know of him. Does anybody ever consider Robert Horry a great player? No. Was he a great role player? Sure. But he ain't being argued about when we talking about the legacy of the game or the greats of the game. He's a small footnote on that. I'm more apt to talk about his teammate Hakeem Olajuwon or maybe Clyde Drexler. But again, all of these guys earned, and when we think back to the Karl Malones in the 90s, the Reggie Millers, all of these guys became, I won't say the word legendary, but became great in their own right, and we knew of them because of, like you said, the work, the hustle, the heart, the drive, the bleed, the fight that we saw on the court. And that contributed, like you said, to how we would view a player and how we see players. And now to your bigger point, nowadays we don't see that from a lot of players. So when I do see somebody hungry or somebody willing to go that extra to get the game right, I'm going to give that person that much more props. Mm-hmm. It's just earned. Again, what are we playing for if we're not playing to win? And ultimately, when you win, the goal is to win at the highest level. Doing that separates you. And I don't get what part of that of the conversation just gets mixed up with the fact of, like you said, you can also just be all right. You could have been good. You could have been decent, but not everybody's going to be in that room, that upper, what's my, the upper room. You see what I'm saying? Not everybody's destined for that. That there is a reason why there's a hierarchy.
I'm gonna tell you why
it's so okay, people.
I'm gonna tell you where it's almost criminal, right? Because LeBron probably is the second greatest basketball player of all time, right? Top three for a lot of people.
No question.
And I think, but unfortunately for him, he may go down as a poster child for a lot of what's wrong with this generation. Meaning that I think sometimes people develop this, I don't really care about this thing because it's not that important type of mantra, in order to protect their fragile ego. Like, we're in a generation now where everybody wants to feel like they've won, right? Everybody gets a prize, everybody gets a
participation trophies and all of that crap.
Like, we're seeing societal changes affect sports, because when we talk about the rivalry, that's why these kids grow up liking each other, because it's probably improper to not like each other. You got to have good sportsmanship, right? Everybody has profiles and brands that they have to maintain, right? And so those types of things seep into the sport. And so to me, LeBron is doing himself a disservice, because when you cheapen your accomplishments by trying to make it seem like the rings aren't a thing, when your entire legacy low-key has been your relentless pursuit and how consistently you've been in the running. You can't try to make the ring case now because you didn't win as many and not expect for some to then use that same case against you, because guess what? You didn't win any. Because the same people that would make the case for LeBron being the GOAT would say part of the conversation, even though he didn't win, is look at how many he went to. And that's a credible, legit argument to say, damn, that dude was so dominant on one half of the NBA that he went to the finals that many times, right? So then that would be an argument to bolster. But the goal of that, what makes that so impressive, was the fact that you were in the search of a ring. So if you devalue that for which you was in the search of, then you also devalue the journey that you were on to a certain extent. So I get why he's doing it. It sucks for me because I think LeBron can let his merit stand on its own. You don't got to poly this much. It speaks to, on the one hand, a certain level of entitlement and arrogance that it seems like some of these younger generation players have, but then at the same time, the lack of respect that they have for some of the greatness of the past, as well as the work that some of these guys put in, even though it was a different era. Who cares, Bron? You're still top three, right? But the ring still fucking matters. That's the reason why we play. And lastly, I think that's the other reason I was saying, going back to the SGA point, you might look at it as one way, but if somebody says, damn, if they don't care about the ring,
then why are they playing? I mean, they're making money already. Damn, these guys don't even look like they really care anymore. Well, if they don't care, why should I care? Why should I spend my dollars?
Yeah.
Right? Because it's just not
bring
free.
a valid point there.
It's not free. There's been way too many times. Again, you were mad yourself because you didn't like the way Anthony Edwards ended, not because you don't think he really cared, but because it came across that way. Right? Did I remember that correctly?
Well, it just seemed for me, it was like, I think the effort somehow, it
just came across like he didn't really care for real.
He didn't care enough.
The body language wasn't there. And like back in the day when we saw Jordan cry after losing to, was it the Pistons or whatever, we could tell that nigga cared. Bro, whether you're crying in celebration or crying in like, despair because you lost, how many niggas we see crying for real?
No, you that's an emotional thing, especially on that stage. Look, as much as Jordan was getting his ass whooped, I understand.
That brother was crying.
That was blood, sweat, tears. We know a little something about that.
Yeah, that brother was crying. You know what I mean? But you know who else who are finally about to get, because we got to wrap this show up. It's been a great season finale. We're going to ran through all the topics. But you know who gave up their blood, sweat, and tears to get to where they're about to be in a few days? The NBA draftees to be, right? Them boys are excited. Any thoughts about the NBA draft? I mean, there's so much going on with the trades. What do you think is going to happen with the draft? Anything to take away real quick before we get up out of here?
Just to be interesting, obviously, I think Cooper Flag goes number 1. And I think that'll probably be the headline of that. The question is, will there be any trades that impact things like maybe, let's say, where my boy Giannis may end up, or also a lot of stuff around Ace Bailey and what he may end up being. His stock is steadily starting to drop. So he's a story you should also keep an eye on and kind of keep your, I guess, next week, keep your ears open for. Speaking of ears open, I know there's been some recent conversation that was brought up about blacks and baseball and the declining numbers in that. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can tell you, because number one, if I'm black and I'm physically talented, I'd rather play basketball than baseball. The path to getting into the league for real is a bit more arduous than basically being able to get NIL deals while playing for Duke for a year or two before I go to the NBA and make the big bag. So if I'm a black kid watching, the landscape, financially, it's going to make more sense for me to go to one of these other sports. So I think that's a big part of it, right? That's number one. And I want to go back to just real quickly about the draft, because honestly, with SGA was like the 11th pick. So now, even with the draft, it's like, yeah, you can get excited, but it's very possible that the guy that you're not thinking about can ultimately be the MVP. So I do think that everybody's paying attention to one guy. I'm not sold yet. You know what I'm saying? I'm sorry. I need to see more when it comes time for the NBA. So Cooper Flagger, whoever, good luck to you, my brother. Good luck to all those guys out there. But I do wish them nothing but the best, right? But that's why, because the money ain't right. We not finna go out there to backwoods Birmingham just with some sunflower seeds playing in the hot sun, hoping to be called up eventually after we got to compete with Jorge and them who are used to the cotton and shit. We ain't doing all that. Let me fly these little jets to these games real quick. But speaking of retiring, Jon Jones is retiring? Like finally, for real? This time or what?
So according to him, he is officially retired and done. I don't know if this is definite. It seems like it should be the final time. I'll never be one to call Jon Jones scared or anything. Believe me, that man can whoop a lot of people's asses, including mine. I want none of that smoke. Let's just make that clear. But it is interesting that the timing of his retirement is right before, as they've been trying to get this fight with Tom Aspinall going. And so now with that being done, Tom Aspinall is now the unified champ. So I guess in essence, there's nothing for him to come back for unless it's to just fight him for that unification belt. I honestly don't even see that happening.
All right. Well, listen, I don't want no smoke either. So we're going to wish Jon Jones the greatest life thereafter. In fact, I'll party with Jon. Like, hit me up, my brother. You know what I'm saying? But we'd love to have you on the podcast. You know what I'm saying? We'd love to have you on Third and Short. We want no smoke here.
None.
Nothing but the best. Nothing but the best. Nothing but the motherfucking best. With that being said, Plum, before we remind the audience to like, subscribe, follow, and all that good stuff, and we talk about how amazing the merch is or whatever, how do you feel about this season, man? After it was, 10 years damn near?
Man.
Since we did Third and Short, brought it back right in time for the NBA playoffs. It's the season finale. So what are your thoughts, man, about the season? How'd you feel about it?
Man, just fun to get back out here and be able to have these good conversations with you, talk to the people, get a chance to get a feedback from a lot of folks. So shout out to everybody that's viewed, everybody who's paid attention, everybody who's watched, everybody who's liked, subscribed, commented, hit the heart buttons, all of those things. We want to say thank you to you guys. I think it's been a great success, and it's just something that we look forward to building upon. As always, it's nothing without you, my brother. It's always a privilege and a pleasure. I'm just looking forward to the greater things for us to come on with. You hide me.
Yes, because what he's talking about is season 2, which hopefully as the football season rolls around, the excitement of sports, the fall, so much going on. So we'll be on break for a little while. For me, this was great because I do love talking sports. I'll be honest, the past couple of years, my interest in sports has waned. And so this show gives me an opportunity to kind of be back in sports, kind of where I'm at right in my life right now. I want everything that I do to be purposeful. And so the fact that I can talk sports with my homie, and we build a platform to reach hopefully millions of people and have the kind of conversation that I think many of us have with our friends and barbershops, et cetera, but maybe do it at a level that really gets us to the bag. So NBA, if you're watching out there, don't forget, hey, this series was amazing. The type of basketball that was played, oh my God, I want another. I mean, I hope Hallie comes back. And can I get another one of these, please? Can I get another one of these? NBA, call us on behalf of myself, Nick Nice, aka Big Nick Energy, and my guy DJ Plum, aka Jason Plummer. We'll see y'all next season. In the meantime, stay tuned to the BLC Pod, the BLC Network. We'll see y'all next time. Be easy. Peace. Pew, 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 pew.